So there's a lawsuit, and it's an interesting one because just throw it in with all the other things going on between Chicago Public Schools and the CTU. And to help us understand a little bit, and maybe the precedent it might set, is Mark Mix. He's president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Mark, good morning to you.
Good morning, Bruce. Good to be on with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the lawsuit on behalf of a couple of Chicago public school teachers.
Yeah, Bruce, this is an interesting case, and it's kind of a continuation of some litigation that the foundation has been running and won a major case back at the U.S. Supreme Court in 2018, a case called Janus v. Aspen, which came out of Illinois. And the fact is that public sector workers across America could be compelled to pay dues or fees to a union, a private organization, in order to work for their government. We took that case to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the majority of the court ruled that it was a First Amendment violation, a violation of freedom of speech, to force someone to pay a union in order to work for their government. And so after that decision was handed down by the Supreme Court, lots of cases came up about how in the world could government employees exercise their rights. And it came to us a case out of the October 2019 teacher strike in Chicago. Two teachers came to us and wanted to exercise their rights to go to work during the strike. They wanted to go into the classroom, teach their children. And of course, they found out about their Janus rights and they tried to exercise them. And of course, the teachers union basically ignored them and said, no, you got to continue to pay dues for the next year and we're not going to let you out. And the school board and the school district continued to take the money out of their paychecks. And basically, what they said is, too bad for you, we're just ignoring you. Well, ignoring these two teachers was a miscalculation on behalf of the unions because they came to us. We now represent them in this case, saying that they could basically exercise get this, Bruce and Judy, they could exercise their constitutional rights at any time. And so these two teachers have taken their case through the court system, and it's pending at the United States Supreme Court. Will be heard at a conference on October 29th as to whether or not the court will take up the case and provide complete freedom for these workers to basically say, I want to exercise my rights and I should be able to do it at any time.
Wow.
So is this about not wanting to be in a union when, that's a rule,
You're required.
A requirement of working there? Or is it about not wanting to pay the dues?
Well, Judy, it's, under previous law, and Illinois law, and Illinois is one of the states that has the most dramatic power of unions across the country. I think California, New York, and Illinois are the three big ones that basically say, look, in order to do anything, you have to be part of the union. You have to give up your associational rights, you have to give up your speech rights, and you have to pay a private organization in order to work. And if under the statutes that are in place in Illinois, if you didn't pay those dues, you got fired, no matter whether you're the best teacher, the worst teacher, a median teacher, a middle-end teacher, or whatever you were, you got fired if you didn't pay the dues. And so a lot of people objected to that. And these two teachers, they objected to the reasons for the strike in October 2019. And so the only way they can vindicate their rights is to basically resign union membership and be disciplined. They could have been disciplined by the union if they crossed the picket line, and that's very significant. That we represent a lot of employees across the country that get penalized for going up against the union dictates. And so in this case, they decided they wanted to teach that was disagreeing with the union. So now they basically can say, we don't want to be part of the union and we don't want to be forced to pay any money, and we want to exercise our First Amendment rights. If you want to be in a union, Judy, you can. If you want to pay the union, you can. If you want to give your entire paycheck to a union, you can. But you can't be compelled, and you can't lose your job if you don't.
Mark Mix, again, is the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, talking about this specific case of some Chicago educators and CTU. Is there a distinction, Mark, between public and private sector unions in this?
Yeah, there is, and that's a great question, Bruce. I mean, basically what the court ruled is because everything that government unions do is political, i.e. they're redressing government to basically influence how government spends their money. They said there's kind of a different standard, and the state is an actor in that equation. In the private sector workers in Illinois and the 22 other states that don't have right to work laws that give workers the choice to choose whether or not they want to financially support a union, you can be fired. But that's a statute that came down back in the 1930s when Franklin Roosevelt, the last time we tried to threaten the Supreme Court by packing the court, the Supreme Court blinked, and now we have a federal law that says private sector workers can be fired from their jobs if they don't pay union dues. In this case, the Supreme Court looked specifically at the public sector union members and public sector employees. And frankly, the private sector is a whole other issue altogether.
Fair enough. I just wanted to point out, though, that I think a lot of people see them differently as well.
Yeah, and whether or not they should is a great question, Bruce, because, when you think about constitutional rights, you think about First Amendment constitutional rights. How can you say some individual has it and another individual does not? But the idea of the statutory framework for the forced unionism in the private sector is something that probably has to be solved through the legislature because, the court would look at it and say, well, the legislature said this is going to be the law of the land. We hope someday to get to that issue as well, and we think we should. I mean, if a private sector employee, can have their rights violated, their constitutional rights violated as they've been established for public sector employees, what's the difference? What's the difference?
How do you see this playing out? I mean, the Supreme Court. This is as serious as it gets. Do you think you got a good shot?
Well, we think so. We at the Right to Work Foundation, we've been in business since 1968. We have 21 employees that provide free legal representation to employees just like this. We've had 18 cases that have made it to the Supreme Court. The Janus case made it there in 2018. We had another case out of Illinois on behalf of home health care workers, a case called Harris that was an Illinois-based case that was really interesting. You had the Illinois law forced mothers who were taking care of their disabled children in their own home to pay union dues in order to take care of their own children, but that's a whole other story as well. But we think that the court is interested in the issue. We got these two cases. They're up there on conference. Okay. The court has kind of said, we're not interested right now, but it's possible because of the way this it works out that the unions have created these barriers to exercise your rights. We think and hope that the court will be interested.
Appreciate your time this morning, Mark. Thank you very much for helping us understand this issue better.
My pleasure, Bruce. Thank you, Judy.
He's Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. And I've never heard it in the context of a constitutional argument, of like a freedom of speech argument. I haven't heard that union membership or forced union membership or mandatory dues being put in that context. But when you think about it with the, public sector teachers, police officers. Okay, I think I can start to understand a little better. I do see a distinction between that and private sector unions still. I do see a pretty big distinction. But that's it. Listen, this Supreme Court, you could very well see some fundamental changes coming down the pike.